She was the CEO of the Airline. She built it from the ground up. But when she boarded her own flight, they looked at her skin, not her name, and they told her she didn't belong in first class. What happens when a powerful black woman is humiliated by the very airline that bears her vision? Why did she walk away from her seat without saying a word, only to return 30 minutes later and fire the entire flight crew? Was it revenge, a power play, or something deeper? Something that would change the airline industry forever? And what about the flight attendant who witnessed everything torn between her job, her conscience, and a decision that could cost her everything? This isn't just a story about injustice. It's about silence, about legacy, and about the moment one woman chose to burn the system down, not with rage, but with grace. So buckle up, because this isn't the kind of turbulence you're used to. If this story pulls at your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. You're about to hear what really happened on Flight 308. The morning sky above San Francisco was wrapped in a quiet, slate gray, the kind of sky that whispered more than it spoke. At SFO International Airport, Terminal C bustled with a rhythm both frantic and familiar, rolling suitcases, hurried coffee sips, quiet announcements echoing overhead. But at Gate 34, time slowed down just enough to hold its breath. Dr. Celeste Morgan stepped into line for Heirloom Flight 308 bound for Washington, D.C. Her stride was quiet but purposeful. She wasn't flashy, no designer logos, no bodyguards, just a beautifully cut navy coat, clean lines, and a quiet confidence that didn't need to be explained. In her hand, a first-class digital boarding pass. Confirmed. Paid in full. She handed her phone over to the gate agent with a polite smile. The agent, a white woman in her late 30s with a tight ponytail and the name Becca pinned to her blazer, scanned the code, then looked up and paused. That pause, that half-second too long, was the first clue. Becca's brows narrowed slightly, her eyes flicking from the screen to Celeste's face, and then to her coat, her skin, her silence. Becca said, tapping the screen again. "Sorry, ma'am. Can you wait just a moment?" Celeste blinked once. "Is there an issue?" Becca forced a tight smile. "We've just had some fraud cases lately with first-class upgrades. I just want to double-check something with the supervisor. Shouldn't take more than a minute." Celeste stood still. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand. She just waited. But her silence was not surrender. It was calculation. She watched as a young white man wearing sweatpants and holding a half-eaten sandwich waltzed through the same gate. His first-class pass barely glanced at. No questions, no second scans, no supervisor needed. Becca returned after conferring with a colleague, this time accompanied by a man wearing a lanyard and the authority of someone who thought he owned the jet bridge. "Miss Morgan, was it?" he asked, glancing down at a screen. "I'm afraid this seat assignment isn't processing correctly. There may have been an overbooking. I'm going to need to move you to a seat in our Economy Plus section." Celeste didn't flinch. She simply asked, "Was it overbooked before I arrived?" The man didn't respond to that. He looked away. Becca was already reprinting a new boarding pass. "It's still a great seat," she said, as if that changed anything. "Plenty of leg room." There was a pause, a moment in which everything could have gone another way. Celeste could have pulled rank, could have snapped, could have revealed who she really was. But instead, she smiled, a soft, small, knowing smile. "That's fine," she said, taking the new boarding pass. "I'll take Economy Plus." She stepped aside with grace that unnerved them more than outrage would have. Behind her, someone scoffed. A man in line muttered under his breath. They always try to cheat the system. Good on them for catching it. Celeste didn't respond. She didn't even look back. But inside, something shifted. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. But it just might be the last time it went unanswered. As she walked down the ramp and entered the plane, the crisp uniforms and sterile smiles of the flight attendants greeted her with the kind of cheer that smelled faintly of training manuals and performance metrics. She moved past the first-class section, noting the half-empty rows. So the flight wasn't overbooked after all. Noted. She reached her assigned seat in 23D, near the back of the Economy Plus section. Not terrible, but it wasn't what she'd paid for, not what she had earned, and not what she would forget. Celeste carefully stowed her bag, then lowered herself into the seat. Her coat remained buttoned, her shoulders square, her breath measured. From the seat beside her, a middle-aged man gave her a glance and a slight nod. She returned it politely. The plane buzzed with the hum of carry-ons, conversations, and the low thud of closing overhead bins. Passengers settled, safety demos prepared. A normal flight on the surface. But beneath that surface, something else stirred. Not rage, not vengeance, just a promise. This wouldn't go unnoticed, because unknown to the crew, to the gate agents, to the dozens of silent witnesses who had said nothing, Celeste Morgan wasn't just another passenger. She was the incoming owner of Heirloom Airlines, and they had just made the mistake of revealing their true culture to the one person in the world with the power to rewrite it. She glanced out the window, the runway lights beginning to blur as the plane prepared for takeoff. They had taken her seat, but they had given her something far more valuable. Clarity. 12 hours earlier, the city of San Francisco lay in soft slumber. The sun had barely started to stretch across the hills when Dr. Celeste Morgan stood barefoot in her kitchen, pouring hot water over a ceramic mug of loose-leaf chamomile. She always started her mornings in silence, no emails, no calls, just the sound of boiling water, the creak of floorboards, and the occasional whisper of the ocean wind against the glass. Her home, perched high above Pacific Heights, wasn't extravagant by billionaire standards. It was minimalist, intentionally so. Clean lines, earth tones, walls adorned not with awards or magazine covers, but with black and white photographs of women who had come before her, her mother as a young nurse in Montgomery, her grandmother as a seamstress in 1940s Atlanta, women who had endured, fought, worked in silence, just like she had. The soft ding of her kitchen tablet broke the stillness. Incoming encrypted call, Ray Thompson. Celeste answered, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Ray's voice came through with that familiar steadiness, the kind of calm you only got after handling 6 emergencies before breakfast. "Celeste, it's done." She blinked. "Are you sure?" Ray nodded. "The board voted. Unanimous. Altura now holds 72% ownership of Heirloom Airlines. You are officially the controlling stakeholder." Celeste didn't smile. "Not yet." "How did the press take it?" "No leaks. We moved it through an intermediary shell. Won't hit the headlines for at least 36 hours. You can still board that 3:08 flight without anyone knowing." Celeste turned to look out the window, where gulls floated lazily above the bay. "Then we'll do it," she said. "I'll fly like everyone else. No red carpet, no entourage, just me. Ray hesitated. You know you don't have to do this, right? We've already bought the thing. You don't need to test it yourself. Celeste's gaze narrowed slightly. No, I do. She took a slow sip of her tea. How they treat strangers says more than any quarterly report. 3 hours later, Celeste walked into her closet, choosing what she called her invisible power uniform, a navy wool coat, soft gray slacks, black leather loafers, understated, intentional, no jewelry, save for a thin gold bangle her mother had given her in college. As she dressed, her mind wandered not to numbers, not to assets, but to the people this decision would affect. The single mothers working double shifts, the elderly passengers who'd been accidentally downgraded, the young black men pulled aside for extra verification without cause. She remembered. One particular story had haunted her since the acquisition talks began. A young black physician who was escorted off a plane after being mistaken for a security threat because he had asked for a blanket. She hadn't forgotten. She never did. But today, she would see it up close, feel it, not through a consultant, not through a filtered report, through first-hand experience. The car arrived precisely at 7:45 as always. Her driver, Miguel, nodded with quiet professionalism as he opened the door. D.C. Today, he asked. D.C., she confirmed, sliding into the back seat with her travel bag. As they pulled onto the freeway, Celeste tapped into her secured tablet. Ray had sent over a final folder internal audit reports from Heirloom, compiled over 3 months. Celeste scrolled slowly. 64% of complaints involved cabin crew attitudes toward minority passengers. Only 3 out of 57 first-class complaints resulted in policy revision. 0 staff terminations for verified discrimination in the last 5 years. She leaned back, letting the numbers settle. So much of the corporate world thrived on plausible deniability, words like isolated incident, misunderstanding, unfortunate tone, but she knew better. Behind every data point was a person, a sigh, a bruise, a silent humiliation endured at 30,000 feet. As they approached SFO, Miguel asked, "Want me to walk you in?" Celeste shook her head. "No titles today, just a woman catching a flight." He smiled. "Then fly safe, ma'am." Inside the terminal, she moved like any other traveler. No badge, no announcement, just another black woman in business attire with a rolling suitcase. And yet, as she moved through security, she noticed the same things she always noticed. The long pause of the agent scanning her ID, the way the officer beside her placed a hand lightly on their holster when she stepped forward, the lack of eye contact. It didn't faze her anymore. But she never stopped noticing, because it was in the noticing that change began. As she neared Gate 34, Ray sent one final message board meeting scheduled for 4:00 p.m. Est. All Heirloom execs will be there. No leaks so far. They still don't know who's boarding Flight 308. Celeste typed back, only 2 words. Perfect timing. She silenced her phone, straightened her posture, and walked directly into the storm. The low mechanical hum of Heirloom Flight 308 settled into a steady rhythm as the plane climbed through the morning sky. Outside, the clouds stretched like white oceans, soft, silent, infinite. Inside seat 23D, Dr. Celeste Morgan sat still. Her coat was neatly folded in her lap, her briefcase stowed beneath her feet, her spine straight, her gaze distant. Around her, passengers jostled for overhead space, tugged at tray tables, adjusted headphones. To them, this was just another flight, another day. To Celeste, it was something else entirely. Across the aisle, a boy kicked the back of a seat while his mother scrolled through her phone. An older couple traded pills and water bottles with synchronized efficiency. Flight attendants moved briskly, closing bins and counting heads, and behind them, just past the beige curtain that separated first class from the rest of the cabin, sat the seats she had paid for, the seats she had been denied. A flight attendant with perfect posture and clipped politeness had approached her just before takeoff. The same tone, the same look. "Excuse me, ma'am, we'll need to reseat you. We had a last-minute passenger with special status." No apology, no attempt to disguise the motive. Just the clinical delivery of corporate hierarchy, with an invisible asterisk beside her name, "Does not belong." Celeste had said nothing. She had nodded, stood, and walked the narrow aisle in silence, her heels clicking against the vinyl floor like a metronome measuring restraint. Now, seated among recycled air and tight elbows, she pressed her fingers lightly to her temple. This wasn't the first time she'd been sidelined, but something about this time was different. Maybe it was the casualness of it, the effortlessness with which they had rearranged her dignity, like she was luggage. Or maybe it was the look on the gate agent's face, that slight curl of suspicion, the smirk when she said, "We've had issues with people trying to upgrade themselves lately." That look. It had followed her all her life, in boardrooms, in banks, in elevators where she was mistaken for an assistant, a secretary, or a guest. But never before had that look come after she'd bought the airline. "Excuse me." A soft voice pulled her back. She turned to see the man in the window seat beside her. He was in his early 40s, Asian American, slim, with tired eyes and a laptop open on the tray table. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I couldn't help but notice what happened at the gate," he said. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "You weren't the one who moved me?" "I know," he said, "but I've seen it before. Well, I'm used to being pulled aside, too. For random checks, happens more often when I fly in a suit." He extended a hand. "I'm Thomas Ewan." She shook it gently. "Celeste Morgan." He paused, as in, Dr. Celeste Morgan. Celeste nodded once, her expression unreadable. The Celeste Morgan. He sat back slightly, blinking. "I saw you speak at the Stanford Tech Summit last year. You talked about building equity into artificial intelligence systems. That was unforgettable." Her smile was small but genuine. "Glad someone was listening." Thomas chuckled, then sobered. "Ironic, huh? You give a keynote on equity and still get sent to the back of the plane." Celeste looked out the window, the light catching the curve of her cheekbone. "I've learned," she said quietly, "that the world never stops testing your patience, even when you own the exam." The flight attendant passed by with a tray of drinks. She smiled at the white woman in 23B, a full smile with teeth. When she reached Celeste, the smile shrank. "Water?" she asked, without eye contact. Celeste nodded. No napkin, no ma'am, no effort. The water was set down and she moved on. Thomas noticed. "That is what I mean." Celeste traced a circle in the condensation on the cup. "You get to a point," she said, "where you stop expecting courtesy and start recording patterns." Thomas closed his laptop. "Is there anything you can do about it?" Celeste didn't respond at first. Her fingers tapped lightly on her knee, a rhythm, a decision forming. Then she said, "Ask me again in 2 hours, somewhere near Denver." Turbulence rolled beneath the fuselage like a distant growl. The plane shook slightly. Overhead, bins rattled. A baby cried out. Celeste remained still, inside her. The silence roared, not with rage, with resolve. She thought of her mother, turned away from job interviews because her name sounded ethnic. She thought of the investors who once told her to bring in a more palatable co-founder code for someone white, male, and forgettable. And now this. A seat denied, an opportunity presented. Because this wasn't just a slight, it was a mirror, a raw, perfect snapshot of Heirloom Airlines' culture, one they had unknowingly shown to their new owner. Celeste reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek tablet. She logged in through a private portal. Her fingers hovered over the screen. A single message waited in her inbox, ownership transfer complete. All internal access granted. Welcome, Dr. Morgan. She closed the tablet and smiled. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane leveled off above the Midwest. Some passengers drifted into uneasy sleep. Others flipped through in-flight magazines, their fingers absently turning pages they wouldn't remember reading. But in row 23, something different stirred. Not conversation. Exactly. Not yet. Something quieter. Recognition. Thomas Ewan studied the woman beside him, her silhouette outlined against the oval window. Dr. Celeste Morgan. He still couldn't quite believe it. He remembered her standing on stage at that tech summit, her words measured, her tone calm, her presence magnetic, not performative, not flashy, but real. She had spoken about ethical systems and artificial intelligence, but also about what it meant to walk into rooms not built for you and stay anyway. He had never forgotten that part. And now, here she was, folded into a cramped row of economy seating, sipping lukewarm water, watching clouds float by like old regrets. "Can I ask you something?" Thomas said. Celeste turned toward him, curious. "What made you stay calm at the gate?" Her eyebrows rose. "You expected me to yell?" He smiled. "Just a little." "No, but I think I might have." She considered that. Then she said, softly, "I've learned that shouting doesn't work when people have already decided not to listen." Thomas nodded. "That's the part that gets me. The quiet part of it. How they smile while making you smaller." Celeste glanced toward the front of the plane, toward that soft beige curtain that hid first class like a secret no one wanted to share. "They don't see it as making you smaller," she said. "They see it as protecting something, a space, a privilege, a narrative." He exhaled slowly. "Yeah, that sounds exactly right." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Thomas leaned in, lowering his voice. "I didn't want to say anything earlier, but when I boarded, I saw your name on the manifest. I do contract work in systems engineering. My company used to pitch to Heirloom before they changed CFOs. So, I know you just bought the airline." Celeste said nothing. Her face didn't flinch. Thomas looked embarrassed. "I wasn't trying to pry. I just thought it's okay," she said gently. "You're right." He blinked. "You are the new owner I am." And with that confirmation, the mood in their row shifted. Thomas let out a quiet, disbelieving breath. "Then why let them treat you that way?" Her expression didn't harden, but it did settle. "Because I needed to see if the problem was still there," she said. "And now I know. It is." He nodded. You have all the power, but you chose to be anonymous. That's rare." She glanced out the window again, her reflection faint in the glass. "Sometimes power only tells you who respects the title," she said, "not who respects the person." From a few rows ahead, someone laughed too loudly at a movie. A drink cart rattled past. Behind them, an infant began to fuss, and the sound of a parent's shushing created a soft background loop. And yet, for a moment, Celeste and Thomas sat in a pocket of clarity, a kind of stillness that comes only when truth is spoken without defensiveness. Thomas leaned forward, elbows on knees. "So, what happens next?" Celeste gave him a sideways look. "Next, you've seen it firsthand. The microaggressions, the profiling, the culture. So what now?" She didn't answer right away, because that was the real question. Not just what they had done, but what she would do about it. Inside her, a dozen calculations churned: business impact, legal exposure, investor reactions. But beneath all of that, deeper and heavier, was something else. Her father's voice. "Just because they seat you in the back of the bus doesn't mean you stop driving the route." That was what he told her when she didn't get into Princeton. What he said when she was the only black woman in her engineering cohort at MIT. What he whispered when she was told, "You're too polished to be relatable." Celeste looked at Thomas. "I didn't buy this airline to run another broken system," she said. "I bought it to fix one." He stared at her. "I'm not interested in punishing individuals," she added. "I'm interested in dismantling what made them believe they were right." Thomas grinned slowly. "That sounds like a long game." Celeste nodded. "It always is." As the plane hit a gentle wave of turbulence, Celeste reached for the tablet in her bag. On screen was a blank email draft. Subject line, Phase 1, Internal Audit Activation. Below it, she typed 4 words, "Begin from the inside." Then she paused. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She looked at Thomas. "If I send this," she said quietly, "everything changes." He studied her. "Are you ready?" Celeste didn't smile, but her eyes were clear. "I was born ready." The hum of the plane was steady now, so steady. In fact, it almost felt like silence. Somewhere over Kansas, Heirloom Flight 308 glided along its route like everything was normal. But nothing was normal in row 23. Not anymore. Dr. Celeste Morgan sat quietly. Her tablet dimmed but not off. Her fingers rested lightly on the edge, as if they were waiting for the final signal. A sign, a spark, something. Her conversation with Thomas Ewan had left her with clarity, but also a quiet ache. Because knowing what needed to be done and knowing where to start, those were not the same thing. And despite her strength, despite her position, Celeste was human. Her heart wasn't made of iron. She didn't want revenge. She wanted transformation. Real, measurable, permanent. Just then, as if summoned by the weight of that thought, a shadow passed beside her. "Excuse me," came a voice, barely above a whisper. Celeste turned. A flight attendant had knelt slightly beside her row. Her badge read Layla Brooks. She was black, maybe early 30s. Tired eyes, tight bun, uniform pressed but slightly faded at the collar. Something about her posture subdued. Careful spoke volumes. Celeste's brow lifted slightly. She hadn't seen this attendant earlier. Layla spoke softly, eyes scanning the cabin to make sure no one was watching. "I just wanted to say, I saw what happened back there, at the gate." Celeste said nothing. She watched. Layla continued, nervous but steady. It happens more than people think, especially on this airline. Her voice faltered. I wanted you to know it wasn't right, and I'm sorry. Celeste blinked. Slowly. Of all the things that had been said to her today, these words, gentle, private, unforced, landed the hardest, because they came from a place of shared knowing, not pity, not guilt, just quiet solidarity, the kind that could pass between two strangers in a hallway, or 30,000 feet in the air. "Thank you," Celeste said, her voice equally soft. Layla stood as if she might walk away, but hesitated. "I probably shouldn't say anything else," she whispered, glancing around again. "But the training they give us. It tells us to flag passengers who don't fit the profile for certain cabins." She made air quotes without moving her hands. Celeste tilted her head. What profile would that be? Layla didn't smile. "You already know." There was a silence. Heavy, but respectful. "I've worked here 5 years," Layla continued, "and every week I see the same thing. People like us being told we don't belong, in the places we paid for, in the spaces we earned." She swallowed. "And if we speak up, if we log a complaint or flag a crew member, suddenly our schedules change, our reviews drop, warnings appear in our file." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "I have a kid starting college next year. Another still in braces. I can't lose this job, but I hate what it's turning me into." Celeste's gaze didn't waver. She heard the fear, the weariness, but more than that, she heard the bravery underneath it. "You just said more than most people ever will," Celeste replied. "That matters." Layla nodded once. She was about to turn when Celeste said, "Wait." The attendant froze. Celeste reached into her coat and pulled out a slim silver card, the kind most people never saw twice. Her personal card, no title, no company, just a number and a name, Celeste Morgan. She handed it to Layla. "If things were different," she said, "if the culture here changed, would you stay? Would you want to help rebuild something better?" Layla looked at the card as if it might burn her fingers. "Are you serious?" Celeste gave her a look. Calm, grounded, steady. "I'm always serious about building what we were never given." Layla exhaled, a breath she didn't know she was holding. Then, quickly, she slipped the card into her pocket and nodded. "I need to get back," she said quietly, "but thank you." And just like that, she was gone, moving down the aisle, smile back in place. But something about her walk was different now, like she had remembered who she was. Thomas leaned slightly toward Celeste after Layla disappeared. "That," he said, "was bold." Celeste turned toward him. "No, that was the beginning." She looked down at her tablet once more, opened a secure note titled Internal Witnesses, typed Layla Brooks, Flight 308, willing to speak, quiet courage. Then she closed the file, but not before she added a title to the top, The Ones Who Stayed. Because in every broken system, there were always a few people who stayed, not because they were complicit, but because they were waiting for someone else to show up and say, "Let's fix this. Together." The plane drifted through a high-altitude stillness. Outside, clouds layered the sky like folds of white silk. Inside, cabin lights flickered dim yellow, casting long shadows across tray tables and resting heads. But in row 23 no one was sleeping. Dr. Celeste Morgan sat upright, hands folded in her lap, eyes closed but not resting. She was thinking, calculating, deciding. The card she had given Layla Brooks still warmed her memory. The look in Layla's eyes, a mixture of fear, courage, and exhaustion, was one Celeste had seen too many times before. Not just in others, in herself. And, for the first time in years, Celeste felt something stir beneath all the quiet control she carried like armor. It wasn't rage, it wasn't pride, it was urgency. "You're going to do something, aren't you?" The question came softly from beside her. Thomas Ewan hadn't spoken in nearly an hour, but his voice now was certain, like he already knew the answer. Celeste opened her eyes. "Yes," she said, "I am." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again. "What will it be?" Her fingers tapped slowly on her thigh. "I'm going to dismantle the hierarchy they've built from assumptions. I'm going to replace the ceiling with a mirror. And I'm going to start while we're still in the air." She pulled out her tablet again. Secure login, retina scan, access granted. The screen blinked once, then revealed a private portal Heirloom Executive Communications Hub. Only 5 people in the world had access. Celeste was one of them. She navigated to a file titled Crew Audit Protocol Emergency Bypass, usually reserved for in-flight incidents or federal oversight reviews. She typed in a 6-word command, Initiate Protocol 9A, flag for review. A warning popped up. This will trigger real-time notifications to executive oversight. Continue. She clicked yes. At the other end of the country, in a downtown D.C. boardroom, Heirloom's chief operating officer received a ping on her phone. She frowned. Why was a review being triggered mid-flight, and by whom? She tapped open the security token attached. When she saw the name on the command, her eyes widened. Dr. Celeste Morgan. Suddenly, everything wasn't so quiet anymore. Back on the plane, Celeste closed the portal and leaned back, tablet still glowing faintly on her tray. "What did you just do?" Thomas asked. "I just signaled the executive team that the new owner is no longer observing," she said. "I'm intervening." He shook his head slowly, impressed. "You're calm about it." Celeste gave a faint smile. "If I waited until I was angry, I'd never stop moving. Calm is a decision." There was a moment of silence. Then Thomas asked, "So what happens when we land?" She turned to him, her tone low but clear. "When we land," she said, "this entire airline's leadership will be forced into a meeting they didn't know was coming. Their status reports will be reviewed, their staff records pulled, and 3 layers of internal protection will be stripped away." She paused. "And I'll be waiting in the boardroom. First seat on the left." Thomas exhaled, slow and steady. "You've been planning this." Celeste nodded. "I've been patient. That's different." In the rows behind them, Layla passed quietly again, this time with slower steps, as if she knew something had changed. She glanced toward Celeste just long enough to receive the smallest of nods. No words exchanged, but something passed between them, like the early crack of sunlight through a sealed room. Celeste closed her eyes again, not to rest, but to remember. She thought of her mentor, a black woman who once told her power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "I'm still here." Celeste opened her eyes once more and whispered to herself, "I'm still here." The plane touched down with a soft bounce and the slow whir of reversing engines. Passengers shifted in their seats, phones lit up, seatbelts clicked. Some passengers sighed with relief, others groaned at their inboxes returning to life. But in row 23, Dr. Celeste Morgan remained still, calm, grounded, unbothered by the chaos of landing, because her moment hadn't arrived yet. "Are you being picked up?" Thomas asked as the plane taxied. Celeste gave a small nod. "My driver's waiting at the executive terminal." He smiled faintly. "Of course." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you for letting me sit beside you today." Celeste turned to him fully now. "You weren't just a seatmate," she said. "You were a witness. Don't underestimate how much that matters." Thomas gave a quiet nod, but the gratitude in his eyes said more than words could. At the front of the plane, the curtain to first class was pulled back. A flight attendant who had ignored Celeste for the entire flight gave a sharp thank you to the white businessman who exited first. 2 others followed. No eye contact with row 23, no acknowledgement, just routine. But as Celeste stepped into the aisle, the energy shifted. Layla, now posted at the front galley, straightened almost imperceptibly when she saw her. Celeste gave her a look not warm, not cold, just clear. A silent message passed between them again. Get ready. Outside, the sun was setting. A car, sleek, black, unmarked, waited at the far end of a private gate. The driver opened the door without a word. Celeste stepped inside. As the car pulled away, she didn't reach for her phone. Instead, she looked out at the tarmac, at the jet, at the heirloom logo painted on its tail like a brand on something that didn't yet understand its own history. She spoke quietly. Time to clean house. 1 hour later, inside Heirloom's headquarters, the executive boardroom buzzed with confused energy. 8 directors sat around a high-gloss mahogany table, murmuring. Some clutched laptops. Others thumbed phones under the table. No one knew why this emergency meeting had been called, and that's what scared them. Because when billionaires get quiet, executives get nervous. The door opened. Everyone turned. Celeste Morgan stepped in. No entourage, no grand entrance, just her, wearing the same clothes from the flight, no change, no need, because she didn't have to perform authority, she embodied it. The room fell silent as she walked to the head of the table. She didn't sit, not yet. She set her tablet on the table, looked at each executive one by one. Her voice was low, steady. "Let me save you the trouble of asking. I was on Flight 308. Yes, I sat in economy. Yes, I was removed from my first-class seat by your staff. And yes, I let it happen." Eyes widened, mouths opened, then shut again. Celeste continued. "I let it happen because I needed to see what your training didn't catch. I needed to feel what your metrics didn't measure." She paused, and I did. One executive, a tall man with a perfectly knotted tie, cleared his throat. "Dr. Morgan, with all due respect, wasn't that situation caused by a gate error? The manifest was overbooked, a clerical issue." Celeste tilted her head slightly. "Are you asking me, or telling yourself that to sleep better?" Silence. She stepped closer. "It wasn't a clerical issue. It was a cultural one. Your systems run on bias. Your people enforce it, and your brand, my brand, profits from pretending it doesn't exist." She tapped her tablet once. A screen behind her flickered on. Passenger complaint data, staff evaluations, HR flags. A series of charts appeared color-coded and damning. Over 73% of gate reseating decisions in the last fiscal year impacted black or brown passengers. 90% of them occurred without apology or acknowledgement. She turned to face them again. And that's just what you logged. The truth is worse. Another executive shifted in his chair. Look, if there were missteps. This wasn't a misstep, Celeste interrupted, her voice still calm but firmer now. It was a footprint, one of many, left by a company that never believed people like me belonged at the front of the plane even when we built it. A stunned silence followed. Celeste walked to the head of the table. Finally, she sat. She folded her hands, looked at them, and smiled not with warmth, but with resolve. I'm not here to ask for accountability, she said. I'm here to deliver it. She tapped again. Emails sent, locks changed, clearance revoked, one by one. Red lights appeared on devices around the table. Access denied, profiles terminated. 6 executives were instantly locked out of their accounts. 2 more were flagged for pending review. Only one remained untouched, and he looked around the room in shock. Celeste looked at him last. You once told a flight attendant that our passengers shouldn't look like bus riders with money. I'll give you one chance to explain that on record. He swallowed. I was quoting a report. No, she said softly. You were revealing your reflection. The door opened behind them. Security stepped in. 6 of the executives were escorted out without a word. No resistance. Just the stunned faces of people who'd never imagined their authority could be removed mid-sentence. Celeste stood again. To those who remain, she said, you have 7 days to present a full diversity remediation strategy written by staff, not consultants. If you need an example of what real change looks like, she looked toward the door. Start by asking the people in uniform who never get invited into this room, and with that, she walked out. The morning after Flight 308 landed, Layla Brooks clocked in early. Same black slacks, same navy blazer, same polished smile she'd learned to wear like armor. The terminal smelled of fresh coffee, citrus cleaner, and exhaustion. A new day, a new flight, a familiar ache. She made her way to the crew break room, where overhead lights hummed and flight bags lined the wall like tired soldiers. The lockers, as always, sat in uneven rows numbered, dented, and covered in worn stickers from the city's long past. Her locker was third from the end, always had been. Layla twisted the key, opened the door, and stopped. Inside sat an envelope, cream-colored, unmarked, just her name, Layla, handwritten in clean, cursive strokes. She looked around. No one else was watching. She slid the envelope out, peeled it open slowly, and began to read. Dear Layla, you don't know me yet, not truly, but yesterday, you reminded me of who I used to be. Before the corner office, before the press releases, before the planes carried my name, you reminded me what it means to speak gently, even when the world's been cruel. And for that, I want to say thank you not with words, but with action. You said you wanted to stay. If things were different, I want to make that true. Layla's hand tightened slightly on the paper. She kept reading. Starting today, you're being placed in a new position. Director of Cabin Culture and Inclusion. This isn't a promotion. It's a mission. Your task is simple, but not easy. Listen to the stories that haven't been told. Hold space for the pain that's been ignored. Design systems where dignity is built in. Your uniform will change, but not your heart. That stays exactly as it is. Meet me at 9 a.m. in Conference Room B. The good work starts there. Dr. Celeste Morgan. Layla folded the letter slowly. Her throat tightened. For a long moment, she just sat there, hands still, back straight, remembering all the times she thought no one saw her, all the times she chose to stay silent because speaking up meant risking her paycheck, her home, her future, and now this. Not just a seat at the table, but a blueprint to build the table itself. A voice called out behind her. "Hey, Layla, you good?" It was Marcus, a longtime gate agent. He sipped from a dented thermos, watching her curiously. Layla smiled. Just a little. "Yeah," she said. "Actually, I think I'm great." She grabbed her things and walked to the bathroom, took one last look at her reflection in the mirror, bun still tight, blazer still pressed. Then she removed the name tag from her lapel, held it in her palm, and whispered, "Let's go." By 8:59, she was outside Conference Room B. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, a whiteboard had been wheeled to the center. Beside it, a table of pastries, coffee, and shockingly real ceramic mugs. No corporate branding, just warmth. And behind the board stood Celeste, already writing something in wide, clear letters we build from truth. Layla stepped in. Celeste looked up. They locked eyes. Neither of them smiled, but they didn't need to. Celeste walked over, extended her hand, not as a boss, but as a builder inviting a fellow architect. "Ready?" Layla didn't hesitate. "I've been ready for years." The stage was set, bright lights, navy blue backdrop emblazoned with the Heirloom logo. Rows of reporters, cameras lined shoulder to shoulder. Everyone expected a headline. Everyone expected a statement. Everyone expected Celeste Morgan. Her name was on every press badge. Her flight was all over social media now. Black CEO discriminated against by her own airline. She bought the company and fired them all power. Grace, payback. People waited with bated breath for Dr. Celeste Morgan to walk to that microphone, to say something bold, to deliver the quote that would echo for weeks, but she didn't. Instead, she walked to the edge of the stage, then turned and took a seat. A collective hush fell over the room. The podium stood empty. Confused glances bounced across the front row. Was this a delay, a statement of protest? Then the door at the side of the stage opened, and a woman in a navy blazer stepped out. Not a publicist, not an executive, a flight attendant, Layla Brooks. She didn't walk with swagger. She didn't smile for the cameras. She walked like someone who had waited years to be heard and had no time for performance. She stood at the podium, took a breath, and began. "Good morning. My name is Layla Brooks. Until yesterday, I was just one of the many flight attendants who knew when to smile, when to stay quiet, and when to swallow discomfort for the sake of customer experience. I've worked every cabin. I've handed hot towels to people who wouldn't look me in the eye. I've seen families removed quietly because they made the first-class passengers uncomfortable. I never thought I'd be on this stage, but something happened this week that changed everything." From her seat, Celeste watched, not with pride, with peace, because this was never about her voice. It was about making room for voices that had never been allowed to rise. Layla continued. "A black woman, our CEO, was denied her rightful seat because someone assumed she didn't belong there. But instead of retaliating with fury, she chose something braver. She listened, she waited, and then she lifted others to speak." The press room was dead silent. No flashes, no murmurs, just listening, because the moment was bigger than a headline. It was history. Layla finished with a tremble in her voice, but strength in her spine. We're not just changing policy, we're changing culture. From the gate agent to the cockpit, every layer of Heirloom will now be shaped by people who've lived the consequences of being unseen. We're not fixing an image, we're fixing a system, and that starts today. She stepped back from the mic. For a moment, there was nothing. No applause, just stillness. Then, someone in the back stood up and began to clap. Another followed, then another. A wave of applause rolled forward, not explosive, not performative, but deep, earned. Layla looked down. Celeste was still in her seat. She met her gaze, and Celeste mouthed two simple words. Your turn. Outside, the headlines would twist the story. They always did. CEO silently protests in press conference. Sit-in black flight attendant becomes unexpected. Star of corporate shakeup Heirloom's radical turn, the rise of empathy over optics. But inside the room, something real had begun, and no one could unhear it. Later that night, in a quiet hotel room, Celeste sat by the window watching planes take off under the moonlight. Her phone buzzed, a message from Thomas Ewan. Saw the stream. You chose not to speak. That was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Celeste smiled softly. Typed back, sometimes silence gives others permission to rise. And across the city, Layla stood in front of her mirror, blazer off, speech notes still in her hand. She wasn't used to seeing herself this way. She wasn't used to being seen, but tonight she believed it. Maybe for the first time in her life she belonged. 3 days after the press conference, the emails started. Not from customers, not from passengers, from board members, investors, former allies, people with sharp suits and sharper warnings. Celeste, this feels like you're politicizing the brand. You're moving too fast. Maybe we should issue a softer statement to balance public perception. You're not seriously giving a flight attendant authority. Are you? Each one read like a coded threat dressed up as concern. In her office, on the 31st floor, Dr. Celeste Morgan stared at her screen. Unread messages piling up like frost on a windshield. She could almost feel them whispering behind closed doors. She's emotional. She's overcorrecting. She's going to ruin the company. It wasn't new. What was new was the power behind those whispers now, and the fact that this time she had something to lose. Her phone rang. It was Thomas Ewan. She hesitated, then answered. Getting cold feet? Yet he asked gently. Celeste let out a breath through her nose. No, just measuring the terrain. There was a pause. Then he said, You're making them uncomfortable. That's the cost of shifting gravity. She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. I know, she said, but the question isn't, can I hold my ground? She looked out at the sky. It's, can the ground hold me once I do? She hung up, then stood, walked to her office window. The city below moved in quiet waves, cars crawling, lights blinking, people unaware that somewhere above them, someone was deciding how far to bend before she broke. That night, the first editorial came out. Is Celeste Morgan endangering Heirloom's future? Published in a well-known financial magazine. Anonymous sources, misquoted numbers, ominous undertones. The article called her divisive, said she was elevating social agendas over shareholder interests, referred to Layla Brooks as an unqualified symbol. Celeste read it all, twice, Not because she didn't believe in herself, but because she needed to know what fear sounded like in print. And this wasn't reason. This was fear. She called a meeting the next morning. No suits, no ties, just the internal team, her real circle, Layla, Thomas, Marcus, 3 others. They sat around a circular table in a small, windowless room. No cameras, no titles. Celeste started without notes. "They're coming for this from every angle now," she said. "And they're not wrong about one thing. We're changing the culture." She looked at each of them. They're afraid that the people they ignored are finally writing the policies. Layla, steady and clear, responded first. "Let them be afraid. The only people who should be afraid are the ones who built their empires on silence." Marcus nodded. "You've got our backs. We've got yours." But then softly, someone else spoke. It was Anya, an HR officer who had quietly supported Celeste's movement. Her eyes were anxious. "I'm with you," she said. "But what happens if the board forces a vote? What if they try to replace you?" The room went still. Even Layla didn't speak. Celeste took a long breath and replied, "Then they'll do what they've always done." She paused. "But we won't." She stood, walked to the whiteboard, wrote 3 words, "The work stays," then turned. "If they push me out, you keep going. If they revoke your titles, speak louder. If they erase your roles, rebuild them from memory." She looked at each of them with something deeper than confidence, conviction. "I didn't come this far for applause. I came to plant something that outlives me." Layla's voice was quiet, but powerful. "We're not letting them erase this. Not again." Celeste smiled softly. "No one's getting erased," she said. "This time, we're writing in permanent ink." And as they left that room, the quiet was different than before. Not the silence of uncertainty, but the calm before a righteous storm. The boardroom was colder than usual, not the temperature, the energy. Polished shoes tapped the marble floor. Legal binders thudded onto lacquered wood. The room filled with the kind of tension only money could sharpen. 12 board members sat in silence. At the far end stood Dr. Celeste Morgan, centered, grounded, calm, but make no mistake, she was ready for war. A silver-haired man with cufflinks and a Harvard tie cleared his throat. "Dr. Morgan," he began, voice smooth as ice. "You know why we're here." Celeste nodded. "You're voting on whether to remove me as CEO." "No," he replied. "We're voting on whether your direction is still aligned with the company's values." She tilted her head, unblinking. "I wasn't aware the company had values before this week." A murmur rippled across the table. The man smiled tautly. "This isn't personal. It's about business." Celeste stepped forward, voice still low, still steady. "No, it's always personal. It's personal when employees get passed over for promotions because their hair isn't professional. It's personal when families get bumped off planes because they don't look like they belong in first class. It's personal when my seat, my literal seat, is taken. And the only apology anyone offers is that I didn't make a scene." Someone across the table, a woman with steel-gray eyes, tapped her pen. "But these aren't strategic concerns. They're emotional ones." Celeste nodded slowly. "Yes, they are emotional, because we've spent decades pretending companies don't have souls, but they do. They just don't have consciences, until someone makes them." The man in the Harvard tie raised a hand. Enough. We're calling the vote." But before he could proceed, Layla Brooks walked into the room, wearing her new navy blazer, holding a file, uninvited, unshaken. The room stiffened. "What is she doing here?" one board member whispered. Layla didn't respond to them. She walked directly to Celeste and placed the file in front of her. Celeste opened it. Inside, 32 written statements, all from staff across the country. Anonymous, honest, raw, pages of racism, classism, silence, shame, and hope. At the bottom of each, "Let her stay." Celeste looked at the board. No slides, no data, just her voice. "This is the culture your policies created." She paused. Then, gently, "This is the culture I'm rebuilding." The chair motioned to begin. "Board members, vote now. Remove or retain. Hands raised, one by one. 1, 2, 3, remove. 4, 5, retain. 6, remove." The count stalled at 6-5. One vote left. All eyes turned to the final board member, a black woman in her 60s. She had said nothing the entire meeting. Now, she spoke softly. "I flew Heirloom last month. I watched a black mother be told her child's autism made him unfit to fly." She looked around the room. No one apologized, not even after I gave them my card. "What card?" someone asked. She looked directly at Celeste. "You, Sue, Circuit Judge, 3rd District." The room went silent. The judge turned back to the chair. "My vote is retain. 7-5. Celeste stayed." But something bigger had shifted. Celeste didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She looked at them all and said, "Thank you. Not for believing in me, but for realizing you have more to believe in." She turned and walked out. Layla followed her, speechless. They stepped into the hallway alone. Finally, Layla asked, "How did you stay so calm in there?" Celeste exhaled slowly. "I wasn't calm," she said. Then she looked at Layla with soft fire in her eyes. "I was tired of asking permission to be whole." Outside, the wind had picked up. Clouds moved fast, but inside Celeste Morgan, there was only stillness and the quiet promise that the work would never stop again. Flight 947 to Boston was boarding. The gate was calm. The line moved easily. No chaos, no tension, and yet, as doctor, Celeste Morgan walked through the jet bridge. Something in the air felt different. Not heavier, lighter. She wasn't here for headlines. She wasn't undercover. She was just flying, for once, just a passenger. The gate agent had smiled and handed her a first-class boarding pass, not as a token, but as it should have always been. Still, as she stepped into the cabin, eyes scanned her. Recognition flickered. Whispers rose. And what did she do? She paused, looked at seat 1A, then looked back and kept walking. The man in 4D blinked as she approached. "You're Dr. Morgan." She nodded gently. "I am." He looked confused, but, "Your seat's up there." Celeste smiled, serene. "It's still there," she said. "I just don't need it today." She sat down beside him. Economy plus, a little more legroom, still the same world. She pulled out a notebook, began writing. He glanced, trying not to stare. "Sorry," he said. "It's just, you don't seem like someone who belongs back here." Celeste closed her notebook. "Everyone belongs everywhere," she said. Whether we remember that, that's the real difference. Meanwhile, at the front of the plane, Layla Brooks adjusted her blazer. She was seated in 1A, assigned by the airline, not as a gift, as recognition. A few passengers smiled at her, some familiar from training videos now going viral. She acknowledged them all, but her focus, it was on the crew. 3 young flight attendants stood nearby, eyes wide, nerves twitching. Layla leaned forward and whispered, "You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present." Start there. As the plane leveled in the sky, something beautiful happened. Nothing dramatic, no applause, just a quiet sense that for once every passenger had been seen. The man beside Celeste opened a conversation about policy. Someone in row 9 helped an elderly woman find her blanket. A baby cried and no one rolled their eyes. It wasn't magic, it was work, but it was working. Later, as the sun dipped beyond the clouds, Layla walked to the back. She found Celeste in 4D. Reading, she knelt beside her seat. Gently, no speech this time, Layla said. Celeste smiled, closed the book. "Good," she said. "I'm tired of being the voice. I'd rather be the echo now." Layla nodded, then reached into her jacket pocket and handed Celeste a card. It was a staff badge, but not hers. It had Celeste's name with no title. Just Celeste Morgan Flight 308 passenger. Celeste turned it over. On the back, written in Layla's careful handwriting, "You never needed the seat to prove you belonged. You needed to make space so others could." The plane landed quietly. No press, no fanfare, but somewhere in the cabin, someone whispered, "That's her, isn't it?" And someone else replied, "She's the reason we all look each other in the eye now." Legacy doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just lands safely. A week later, a child boarded a flight with her father. She was holding a doll with brown skin and curly hair. As they walked past the cockpit, the captain smiled. "Is that our newest crew member?" The little girl lit up. "She's going to sit with me in first class." The captain knelt to her level. "Good. That's exactly where she belongs." And above the clouds, the skies had never felt more open. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not take the seat they told you to fight for, but build a table no one can be pushed away from again. Dr. Celeste Morgan didn't win by shouting. She won by listening, by stepping back, so others could step up, by proving that real leadership isn't about control, it's about conscience. This story isn't just hers, it's Layla's, it's Thomas's, it's every child who's ever been told, "You don't belong here." And maybe it's your story too. Because if you've ever been judged before, you spoke overlooked before, you arrived dismissed before you had a chance to try, then you already know how deep this flight cuts. We hope this story didn't just move you. We hope it made you remember, reflect, and refuse to stay silent. If it did, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we tell the truth. And the sky, it belongs to everyone.